Hey, welcome back to 755 is real. What's up, people? I'm David O'Brien, Braves writer for The Athletic. Long time no see. I'm with my co-host as usual, former Braves reliever Eric O'Flaherty. What's up, Eric?
It's been a minute. What's going on?
Man, are your boys grown up now?
It's happening fast. I can tell you that. You look away and they're changing every day. But no, winter's hard because we're cooped up in the house. So I'm ready for spring.
What's winter like in Walla Walla compared to Seattle?
It's cold. It's cold because it only gets down, 40, 50 in Seattle, but it's just raining all the time.
Yeah.
You wind up staying inside here a lot because it's been 25, 30.
You get actual winter where you are now.
It's real winter. Yeah. Kind of nice. Something different.
Well, this off season has been as slow and boring as we thought it was going to be. But things have certainly picked up in the last couple of days with the Hall of Fame and now finally doing some real negotiations. And so there's a lot to talk about here. But I think most of it, if I'm reading the room correctly, I think Braves fans are probably still most concerned about the Freddie Freeman situation. Would you agree with that assessment?
It's kind of a pressing matter, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, around baseball, there's a lot to talk about, but there's nothing more important in Atlanta than Freddie Freeman and his free agency. So I thought Kenny Rosenthal wrote something really good in The Athletic a couple of days ago, pointing out that coming out of this lockout, things are going to be at a frenzied pitch. You've talked about this. And I remember 94, 95 strike when it ended in spring training, how crazy things got. It was chaos, man. The signings, how fast it happens. And I think it's going to be like that to maybe even a greater degree coming out of this thing, depending on how close we are to spring training. But it's going to be a free agent frenzy. And we've talked about this. Even though teams aren't supposed to talk to agents, we all know that they are talking to agents because why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Neither side's going to be reporting the other, and they want to get deals done. So I think there's going to be some deals happen right away in that day coming out. Kenny noted that either the Braves or Freddie Freeman can make kind of a preemptive first strike thing. Freddie, because he knows, free agency, the bigger spots could get filled quickly. And if he's not certain the Braves are going to make him the offer that he's looking for, and then the Braves, on the other hand, if they think they might really lose Freddie, if they're not willing to pay him what he wants, they've already talked to the A's about Olsen, and we've talked about Olsen being a perfect replacement if you have to replace Freddie. But yeah. We're both Matt Olsen, that is, who's from suburban Atlanta, big power guy, Gold Glove defensive guy, 2 years younger than Freddie, but also 4 years younger than Freddie, I think, but also 2 years from free agency. So that is certainly not all roses if you were to get Matt Olsen, because you're going to give up prospects to get him big time because there's a lot of teams that want him. Then you got to pay him.
He's not going to be cheap in a couple of years either.
That's what Kenny made a great point of talking about how. I'm going to make sure I got the age right. Freddie's 32. Matt Olsen's 28. Is that right? Do you have Matt Olsen up?
No, I could check it. But
check that.
It's shocking that he's only 4 years younger than Freddie, as long as Freddie's been in the league.
He's 27?
Yeah, 27. March 29th, 94.
Okay, so he'll be 28. So he's, about 4 years younger than Freddie. Yeah. So, but he's 2 years. Yeah, he's one of those guys that's getting screwed by the current system because he's going to be 30 years old when he hits free agency, or close to it.
Yeah.
And that's why the players are involved to get on the other subject, why the players are looking to shorten the period to become free agents, because the game is skewed so much younger now. But guys like him and Max Fried, they're not going to hit free agency until they're, almost 30.
Yeah. And that's right when teams start saying, maybe, we want to give you a 2-3 year deal. We don't want to pay you when you're 36, 37, maybe breaking down.
Right. So that's why I think the Players Association has a really good case to be made, although I don't think they're going to get all they want, obviously, in these negotiations. But that's something they got to look at. Between that and arbitration, they also trying to shorten that, but they've given up the ghost on that one for this year. They know it's not going to get done. They wanted to go from 3 years to 2, and that's not going to happen. But and take free agency from 6 years to 5. But anyway, getting back to Matt Olsen, big time numbers last year. He's obviously, at his peak right now, and he might very well do everything Freddie could do statistically, but like Ken pointed out, you're going to give up prospects to get him because he's one of the hottest guys on the trade market. And then in 2 years, you're going to have to pay him as a free agent. So while you may have to pay him less than $30 million for the next 2 years in arbitration, probably up between 25 and 30, you might have to pay him $200 million to keep him for like 8 years. If you were to sign him long-term, buy out 6 years of free agency before you get to free agency.
Yeah.
So between paying him $200 million to keep for 8 years and giving up prospects, is it really a smart move not to just re-sign Freddie for 6 years? Kenny threw out 165 there. I think it's going to take more than that now, but who knows? I still just think it makes so much more sense, and the backlash they're going to get from fans, it makes to sign Freddie. Not to mention the pressure also
after winning a World Series. You win a World Series most of the time. Most teams reward their guys, and it's not always your star player, MVP, type of dude that is hitting free agency. So maybe it's a little different, but normally you sign back as many guys as you can from that team as possible and try to keep that unit together and do it again. Now, the thing that sucks for Freddie is he hasn't really gotten a full taste of free agency, because normally the offseason starts and teams kind of slow play it. They want to see where the market's at, and you start getting your real offers right about now. He hasn't even gotten to talk to teams or see what's out there, in a sense. And for the team, that probably works in their favor, because once spring training starts getting close and you don't have a house or anything lined up, you kind of start panicking and wanting to be signed. So that's another reason I could see it happen quick. But who knows? Who knows he could have been close on deals. He could have had offers, and then everything shut down.
Especially if you got 3 little kids like Freddie, you're not, and the family is so important to him and his wife, with her stuff and her business and taking care of the kids. They don't want to be finding out in the last week where they're going to be going to spring training,
No, it sucks. It sucks not having a place lined up, but Freddie travels a little different than.
I was going to say, even though you got private jet, you still want to know where you're going to be.
Yeah.
Have time to kind of scout it out and get a place.
He can afford the rate hike if he has to sign a shorter lease.
Yeah, you're talking about, you win the World Series, man, like the Nationals, the year they won the World Series. They had to make the choice on who they're going to keep. They made arguably the wrong choice. They kept the injury-prone pitcher. But, the Braves aren't really in that position where they have to make a choice on who they want to keep. They're in a good spot as far now the 3 free agent outfielders, but they were only here for a few months. It's not like they became so attached to the fan base. All the fans would love to have Soler and Jock Peterson and Rosario back, but they understand they might not get any of them, or one probably at the most. And that because Adam Duvall is still under contractual control. But the Braves aren't in that position where they got 2 guys hitting free agency where they got to pay a ton of money. They could keep Freddie Freeman, and still come in with a payroll under, say, $180 million. And that's very reasonable for how much their revenue spiked last year. Their revenues, they're pouring in cash, man. I mean, it's like they made so much money last year compared to the year before, not just compared to the year before with no fans, but compared to the last full year with fans in the house in 2019. They made a lot more money this year. And that's not even accounting yet for the final quarter when they were raking it in for a whole extra month with the postseason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the money's there. It's the money's there all over the league, but it's just you can't force teams to spend money. And that's what this whole lockout's about is, the players don't really feel like there's enough teams competing or spending money and all that. And I get people not feeling sorry for millionaires. I get that, but it's just part of the process. With Freddie, though, it's like, for me, it's just where do you draw the line on how big a discount you're willing to take to stay where you've been and get compensated fairly for who he's been as a player. If it's 50 million short, can you be mad at a guy for taking that? If it's 10 million short, I bet he stays. If it's 20 million, I bet he stays. But at some point you got to be like, all right, hometown discounts, I want to do it, but we're talking $50 million now.
And the other thing is, if it's 20 million and the other markets that have been bandied about and speculated upon, New York and California markets, the state income tax, local income tax difference is huge.
It's 11 and 13.
So, I mean, you're talking about 20 million ain't even worth it,
Right.
It's with the comfort factor here being in Atlanta, all that too. On top of that, you already got your house here too. So you don't even have to go buy a house and all that. So it's going to have to make it worth his while. I know he's pissed off too. So he's not going to want, if I'm Freddie, I don't want to take a hometown discount after what they've, the way they've handled this, but we're willing to take, a little less maybe to stay here just because the comfort factor. And you do love all your teammates too. And your coaches, it ain't their fault, that this thing's been extended the way it is, the way it has been. So a lot to think about if you're Freddie Freeman.
He's not this type of guy, but you got to think, if he was playing for the Dodgers or Yankees, even when you talk about Hall of Fame, all this stuff down the road, the guys that, if Andrew Jones played for the Yankees, it's a totally different conversation being on that stage and in that media market. But luckily for the Braves, Freddie's not the type of guy that wants to be blown up and be on SportsCenter and everything. He's more low key and just kind of wants to do his job and go home. But you have to think about those things too. I mean, how much different is his whole career looked at if he'd been doing what he's doing in Atlanta, in New York this whole time?
Yeah. On the other side of that, like Kenny pointed out, when you go to another market, say the Braves get Olsen or Freddie goes somewhere else, the Braves fans, like when Freddie started slow the last couple of years, Braves fans aren't going to boo Freddie Freeman.
Right.
Braves fans are, if he has a bad year, if he signs a big extension with the Braves, or now it's not extension, now it's just a contract, and has a bad year, he's still going to be treated like a king here. They'll give him a year to have a bad year if he needs to. If he goes somewhere else on a big contract and has a bad year, they have no emotional attachment to him. And some of those markets, they're going to be booing him within a weeks. He's not going to go to Philly, but if he did go to Philly and started out slow there, they'd be same thing with the Mets. Not going to go to the Mets, but if he did, the Yankees, they're going to boo, man. So you also got to think about that. I know Freddie Freeman's very confident in what he can do, and he's not going to go somewhere and struggle, and he's not injury prone. But like, look at Andrew Jones, man. When he went to the Dodgers, when he left here and went to the Dodgers, now he was beat up. Mm-hmm. He was beat up, but his performance was really went off a cliff, and they didn't care what he won 10 straight Gold Gloves here and part of the World Series championship team, or that he hit 400 some home runs, or whatever. They just. Here's we're paying this guy. Look what he's doing now. So I don't know, man. It's I just didn't think it would come to this. You earlier than me thought there was some doubt, but I didn't think that it would come to this, and but it came to this.
Well, I just know like the player mindset is the closer you get to free agency, the more you want to taste it. Like when you're 2 years out and you get offered a fair extension. Right. There's a lot of shit that can happen in the next 2 years. Tear your ACL, career-threatening injury. It's that security has a lot of value. But when you're like in his shoes, he was 4 months away when we were talking about it. Spring training, 6 months away. The closer you get to it, the more it's like, well, I might as well go see what's out there. And honestly, I think that's probably more what he did than anything is he just wanted to make sure he wasn't taking a shitty discount. Make sure I'm not leaving 60 million on the table or something. And
he had to, with the offer they made him, reportedly made him, it wasn't insulting, but it was low compared to what he knew he could get, he had to, at that point, you had
to play a whole season with the pressure of, if I suck this year, that's his first time in 7 years. He had to play a season where if he sucked, there could be repercussions.
Or if he got hurt,
get hurt, so I think,
he gets hit by a fastball like it happened before.
Yep, it pisses you off in a sense of the team putting me in this position. And, teams have their budgets and what they want to spend. And I can't criticize their side of it or how they're doing things. I just know if I'm in his shoes and I'm 4 months out, 3 months out, 2 months out, and then you get there, you're not signing in November. And then everything gets locked out. So for me now, it'll come down to when it's over. I'm sure his agents had time to communicate and he wants to get it going. I think it'll happen pretty quick either way.
Yeah. Not to mention how many times he had to answer the questions about this
all year.
I mean, if you're trying to play in the postseason and you're getting asked at every press conference about how this could be your last game with the Braves, that sucks, man.
Yeah.
That sucks. I felt bad for Freddie to have to, and he answered him, of course, wonderfully because he's Freddie Freeman. But man, I would have been pissed. I'd been like, I don't want to talk about this shit anymore, man.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about it for 2 years. Same question.
It seemed like it.
Yeah,
but
it gets old.
And I'm sure his agent has talked to some teams, but at the same time, they haven't been able to do that public negotiating stuff where you weigh one team's offer off another in the media, drive the price up. It's a little different when you're having to call teams and go, hey, I'm just so you know, we're getting this kind of offer from this team. And then you're also running into things where you could get in trouble for talking to teams if you're saying, telling this team that this other team made this offer and all this. So
I'd say he has a good feel. He has a good feel.
Yeah, I would too.
Where everybody's at now, and he'll be able to make his decision.
Yeah, and I think the Braves probably have a good feel on realistically what they're willing to go to and their chance that is of him returning here. So I think he's probably given them that, right of last refusal type thing. Here's the offer. What are you guys going to do? Can you beat it? He's probably giving them something like that. But at the same time, if they get a sense, if the A's say, look, we got 3 teams ready to pull the trigger on this trade for Matt Olson. We need to know what you're going to do. Something's going to have to happen. Yeah. Somebody's going to have to make a decision before they're real comfortable making it.
Well, I mean, it's just like the lockout. They didn't talk about shit for 45 days. And then you start getting closer and things have to get going. That's when people make decisions. So I'm not surprised it didn't happen before the lockout, but I'd be surprised if the lockout ends and we don't have, answer one way or another after a week or two.
Oh yeah. A week or two, most, maybe a day or two.
Yeah.
Depending on how close we are to spring training. We talked about this. They waited and waited and waited, and we knew they would. You said they would. Nothing was going to get done before January. Realistically, we've talked about this. Pitchers are the only ones that need 6 weeks of spring training. And they could do – you could start as a pitcher. You're throwing now anyway. You could do your work at home that you would be doing in those first couple of weeks of camp. The hitters can get by with 3 or 4 weeks and be fine.
Yep.
That's more than enough time. The first week or two of Grapefruit League, normally you're playing all the prospects anyway. And then at the end, the last week, the hitters are going, let's go. We're ready, Yep. So you could condense all that into 3 or 4 weeks and that'd be fine.
I thought you made a good point, before we got on, saying that teams really aren't too worried about losing April because they don't get good attendance in April, but players get paid the same the whole year. So there's definitely, I don't know. I mean, I've talked to some guys and, the first couple offers that MLB made to the Players Association was like, you're trying to buy a used car and they want 15 grand over MSRP or something for it. Yeah. Like they wanted to lock this out and they didn't really make any effort to avoid it because they want to put that pressure on them. But we'll just see. I mean, it's an ugly thing. I hate seeing how it plays out publicly, because you wind up with the fans just pissed at both sides. And
no doubt,
maybe rightfully so. I don't know, but it's just part of business. And when I've watched this whole thing, kind of like, whatever, don't care. Tell me when there's news, because it's hard for me to get emotional about it, knowing it's all just a business strategy on both sides.
Billionaires versus millionaires, and the 99 point whatever % of us, fans cannot relate to that. Yeah. They have it's like monopoly money, and they just look at it and go, if we're forced to make negotiations or talk to, we get stuff done because we can't just, we don't have all this money in the bank that we can sit back and wait till things happen. They're living paycheck to paycheck, man, trying to pay for kids' education. They're, and then it's like a huge investment to take the family to a ball game. So when you got people in the off season haggling over hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, it's like, come on, man, just get this done. You're taking a big portion, a percentage of my earnings for me to go watch you play. Do us the favor of getting this damn thing settled. I mean, come on.
For me, that's the one point I don't like when people make is when they try to blame ticket prices and stuff on player salaries.
Right.
I mean, hot dog's still going to cost $27. Whether the Braves get Freddie for $160 or $120, those prices
still going to be 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks.
Yeah, that's just what, there's enough people willing to pay it. So that's what they're going to charge, whether it's fair or not. I think that's one of the worst things about the game is all those upper deck seats that are always empty because they're still charging whatever, 25, 30 bucks a ticket. Like give them away for $1 and fill the stadium up and make the environment better. But
There used to be a lot more of those dollar nights and that kind of thing too, especially early season, when school's still in session, those tickets should be $5, man.
Yeah.
The owners, other than opening day in April, there's a lot of empty seats in ballparks, especially in places where it's cold, which is the majority of ballparks. So if they lose 10 games in April to get what they want, they will do that.
Worth it for them.
Owners, whereas players, like you said, they get paid the same amount, whether it's a game in April or a game in July or a game in September. The owners, if they have to knock out part or most of April, they will do that if it gets to them a lot more of what they want in these hard negotiations with players. And they just went through it, and they lost a whole season of fans, and played 60 games. They lost broadcast and fans. So if they have to go 10 games without them, they'll do it, unfortunately, because I think that sucks, because then you have to redo the whole schedule and all that, and push back everything. And people plan vacations around this crap, man. I mean, it's like, people are jacked up about opening day and being there for that first week of games or whatever, that first weekend. So all of a sudden you tell them, sorry, we're not going to be playing that. We got to haggle over this money, man.
Yeah. The bottom line is this just really bad for the game.
Bad.
No matter how long it lasts, the fact that it's even happened, the whole thing is, when you look at the fans, they're not going to feel bad for anybody involved. They just want baseball back. And the longer this goes on, the worse it is for baseball.
After the 94-95 strike, which was a strike, this is a lockout, very different. But it was for fans, it wasn't very different. They look at it as the same. Work stoppage. Same. You guys are haggling. It's a very different thing, but it ain't to them. So after that, I mean, I literally heard people saying for the next 10 years, you'll even hear some today saying, I've never gone back to baseball since then. But I heard it all the time for the next 10 years. Now they lost me with the strike. I'm not back because it cost them the World Series and the playoffs, all that. And that did so much damage to the game. And, people are right when they say the driven home run chase saved the game, because it did. And it really did that year. I'll give them that. I was covering it, and that got a lot of interest back in the game. So that was the one good thing about
I've seen people saying, why does Bud Selig get in? Because he oversaw all that steroid stuff, but his job wasn't to play it clean. His job was to get baseball back, so it's almost like,
whatever
for me, that's him turning a blind eye is kind of a plus at him, having a feel for his job and what his goal was, whether he belongs in there or not. I look at it like, he knew how important that was for the game, and he didn't have to get his body ready.
I think sometimes people forget who pays the commissioner's salary.
Yeah.
He is the bosses are the owners.
Yep.
They're his boss. So he does what satisfies them.
That's it.
That's why Manfred could do things sometimes that you're just like, good Lord, does he know what a prick he's coming across as? He doesn't care what the fans or the players to the most large extent. He cares about what the owners think, and he's making them money, and that's all that matters, unfortunately.
Yep.
So, but just so people are clear too, us baseball writers, we did not vote for Bud Selig for the Hall of Fame. I think sometimes people think we voted him in. That was the era committee that voted him in. We had nothing to do with Bud Selig being in the Hall of Fame. If that was left up to the writers, he would not have been voted into the Hall of Fame, just so we're clear on that. So anyway, Hall of Fame. Speaking of the Hall of Fame, one guy gets voted in yesterday. Not a surprise if you were following this thing along. The Hall of Fame tracker is great that not Mr. Tibbs does on Twitter. It's really accurate. And he said all along, even when those guys were running 78, 80%, Bonds and Clemens, they kept noting that when the ballots that are not made public are counted, drops every year, those percentage of their and so we pretty much knew from following this thing, those guys weren't going to get in, and they really didn't get close. They didn't even get 70%, Clemens and Bonds. So they're off now. That was the 10th year for them and for Sosa and for Schilling. Schilling would have been in if he wasn't an idiot, man. If he wasn't such an asshole. That's probably
one I agree with the least is him just not getting in for being an asshole.
He would have been in if he's not just a total asshole. I mean, if he was just a jerk, that's fine. We voted in a lot of jerks. I don't care. I mean, there's a lot of people I vote for that I don't like. Yeah. And I voted for Schilling. And I can't stand Schilling as a person and what he stands for, what he talks about. But he's a Hall of Fame player to me. No, hands down.
Yeah.
but a lot of people didn't see it like me. And when he said, take me off the ballot, a lot of people said, okay, I'll take you off my ballot. Fuck you, man. And they did. Yeah. They took him off the ballot. So his if you look at his Hall of Fame voting arc, it's going to be like unprecedented, because he's like this close. He's over 70% last year. And that's a lock to get in the following year, when you get that close. But he went back down. So he's off the ballot now. And if he thought his peers, and the era committee, that he was a lock for them to vote him in, I think he should, if he was smart, which he's shown repeatedly that he's not, or if he just wasn't such an ass, he would have just, sucked it up for a year, got voted in, and then he could have said, he could have been a jerk yesterday. Yeah, he could have been. I don't want to have an acceptance speech. I'm in. Screw you guys. You didn't like me. So he could have done that if he wanted to. But instead, he wanted to, give us the finger and think that that he was a lock for the era committee. And I don't think he is. I mean, that's a lot of players. And if you weren't his teammate, a lot of them don't like him. And then some of the things he said, some of the political stuff, some of the hate speech might not offend some older people. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it might not offend some the way it offended a lot of the writers. But it's going to offend some. And a lot of people just don't want him to be any part of the Hall of Fame, some of the things he said, and just what a jerk he's been. So it's going to be interesting, but I do not expect him to get in at least the first time with that era committee when it meets in December. That is a lot of people fighting for ballot.
I mean,
no.
If you scroll through Twitter or some social media or turn on, there's a lot of people fighting for Bonds and Clemens and thinking but even former players, I don't see too many guys dying on that hill for Schilling to get in. And if you look at his numbers, he should be there.
Even if they liked him as a teammate, and why wouldn't you like him as a teammate? What he did, the things he said, I know a lot of people don't want, and even if they still talk to him, a lot of people don't want to attach themselves to that and don't want to look like they're supporting that. So that's going to hurt him with the votes, when it comes out. I mean, if you're on that 16-man committee, the era committee that votes in December, and he gets, say, 12 votes and gets in, you got to get 75% of those votes too, 12. Then unless you come out and say, I didn't vote for him, you're going to get lumped in with you voted for him. So there's a lot of people that do not want to be part of that. Don't think he should be part of that. And also they cringe at the thought of him making a speech in Cooperstown, what he might say.
He's going to, well, especially now, but I don't know. I mean, for me, I don't think character, either character's a huge part of it, and you reward all the guys that did it right and were good, like a Fred McGriff type of guy. It's like he represented the league,
Dale Murphy.
Dale Murphy. These guys have to get in. And I guess that for me, that's the hardest part for me about getting real excited about this whole thing is everybody has their own criteria.
Absolutely. They never make it real clear to us how we should vote, what we should stress. Should we?
Yeah. Like for me, I talked to you about it and you're like, I'll never vote for a steroid guy. And that's your thing. I can't have a problem with that. And I'm torn on it. Torn on it. Days I wake up feeling like shit.
Yeah.
I'm 36 and I wake up and if I want to go play golf, I got to stretch and do all this crap to get my body ready to go play stupid golf. Right. And I look at a guy that's hitting 40 homers at 38, 2 years older than me. Those days where I'm feeling my body feels terrible. And I know that they got that shortcut, because that's what drives a lot of guys out of the game is how they feel, Those days I'm like, I don't think they should get in, just for cheating and extending their career that way. But other days I look at it and I'm like, these guys were Hall of Famers before they got on the sauce. They were going to put up these numbers anyway.
There's arguments on both sides, man. And I don't pretend that I'm that my beliefs on it or the way I'm voting is right. It might not be right, but it's the way I see it. So but I totally understand other people look at it as it wasn't technically against the rules of baseball. There was no rule about it. And until they put it in and guys got suspended, they don't vote for the guys that got suspended, but they will vote for the guys that didn't get suspended. I understand that. I just don't believe in it because I trust what I know and what I saw, and I don't want to vote for cheaters. And then I know some people say people that did greenies cheated. Nope. To me, there's a big difference between performance enablers and performance enhancers. And what those guys did when they were popping greenies back in the day, when they were riding trains and playing day games after night games and not doing first class travel and playing in wool uniforms and all this other
with wooden shoes.
Right. And I look at the body of work and I don't see any player from then whose numbers just warped the whole thing and distorted the whole statistical view, where you look at Joe DiMaggio or some guy, I don't know what Joe did. I don't think Joe did. He was not known to be a big abuser of anything. But if you knew some guy did a ton of greenies or whatever, there's nobody you can look at and go, he had 180 RBIs one year when nobody else had more than 110. Right. There's nobody like that. And there's nobody that had those numbers at age 40. So I just think there is a clear and a distinct difference between, and also when they say Hank did it, that's bullshit, man. Hank wrote in his book, and he admitted somebody gave him a greenie. They said, here, try this, because he was feeling really low one day. He tried it, said it almost made him, he barely could play. He was so dizzy until he said he never touched anything again. There is no other proof that Hank Aaron ever did anything. One time he did a greenie. That's not, to me, that's not performance enhancing.
Yeah.
If it almost made the guy vomit, and not be able to play. So
for me,
but
that's
anyway.
also a level playing field. Like for me,
right.
Guys that I'm not too mad. Obviously, if you see a guy go from hitting 17 a year to all of a sudden he's hitting 60 for 5 years, it's like, well, that's probably when he started. There's no like Sosa. There's no way to like Sosa. Maybe he wasn't a Hall of Famer if he didn't get on him.
No, he's not. But the other guys that would have been, I agree with you. Yeah. I think Bonds and Clemens would have been.
No matter
Bonds
what.
Especially was already a Hall of Famer before he went to San Francisco. And I'm not arguing that. And I can respect people that vote for him because he was a Hall of Famer. He's the one guy when I did adopt my policy, because at one point you have to adopt your policy. What's it going to be? How are you going to do it? And I don't want to be one of these wishy-washy guys that changes every year, because that's bullshit.
Yeah. Well, it's trendy to vote for Bonds now, too.
Right, exactly. And I could have made it a lot easier on myself to vote for him. Believe me.
Yeah.
Okay. But I said at one point, he's the one guy I would have voted. Clemens, there was even some debate, because when Boston let him go, they saw him breaking down, and all of a sudden he was Superman again with Toronto and Houston Astros and all that. So I don't know. I still think he had like 2 Cy Youngs before that, maybe 3. Barry Bonds was the best player in the game before he went to San Francisco. I think he'd already won 3 MVPs. He would have been a Hall of Famer. I don't debate that with anybody, and I don't have anything against him personally. And he was a great player. Yeah. I just hate what he did to the game, what he did to the record books, where he set the bar, what he did to Hank Aaron's record, the fact that nobody cares what the home run record is anymore, either the single season or the career. Do you even know how many home runs he hit in his career? You played the game. Do you know how many home runs he hit?
Bonds? No clue. Yeah.
Nobody has a clue.
1 million.
And that sucks. Doesn't that suck? That used to be the most glamorous record in pro sports. I just hate
you don't even get to look at it now. If a guy's got 50 at August, it's like, he's not hitting 72.
And the walks record and the post age 35 marks and all that, don't worry about them. They're never going to be touched again. Anyway, we're getting off the subject there. But getting back to yesterday, Hall of Fame. Big Papi goes in. Also a sore subject with some people who said he tested positive. He was not on the Mitchell report. People that say he was on the Mitchell report, he was not on the Mitchell report. He did that survey testing. He was one that came, and there was both the commissioner and the players union guy at the time, Wiener, said that was a very suspect testing, in that they know there were at least probably 12 false positives from that group. He tested positive. He insisted till the end that he never did it. He never touched anything. He was tested as much or more than anybody after that during his run with the Red Sox.
That's what's so believable about him, though, is he raked for 12 years after testing
clean.
Started.
That's why. And you look at his body. Yeah, he was bigger, but that's not a steroid body. I mean, that was a
cerveza body.
so anyway, I don't have a problem voting for him. He was the one guy that I voted for that's ever had any connection to all the steroids, though. Sheffield kills me not to vote for Sheff, because I think Sheffield would have been a Hall of Famer too, but that was a pretty hard connection. And he didn't even Sheff never even debated or argued that he didn't do steroids. He said he didn't knowingly do them when he put that cream on, but he was working out with Bonds.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time with that, that he didn't know what he was doing. But anyway, I love Sheffield, man. I love covering him. I thought he was an unbelievable player, the best bat speed on any player I've ever seen. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer if he doesn't have that connection. So it's a shame. But anyway, The only guy that gets in yesterday is Big Poppy. Well deserving, first ballot Hall of Famer, and he joins quite a few that were in with the era committee. So there's going to be a nice class going in next year. And then the era committee that votes in December. Wow, they've got a hell of a ballot to look at. And I think our guy, Fred McGriff, has a real good chance of being voted in December. So he could be in that class next year too. Talk about a guy that's been deserving, that's getting overlooked. I know everybody points to Andrew, that I think's a Hall of Famer. I vote for him every year. Murph, I think, got screwed, and I think he should get, and the era committee has passed him over a couple of times already. Fred McGriff, though, I think has a stronger case than any of those guys.
Yeah.
I just don't understand with Fred McGriff why he's not in.
But that's my point too, of like, there's no suspicions on him.
None.
And he played in that era. He's hitting off of roided up pitches.
Exactly.
I just, for me, it's got to be one or the other. Like if you're going to get docked for being associated, there's got to be at least a small reward for we think he did it clean.
Right. For him and Murph, same way. And for great character. And for never being involved in a controversy. And for treating people, if you're going to put character in it at all, then those guys should get bonus points for character. Yeah, or is it just that you can only have negative character? I don't know.
Seems like it.
But McGriff, everything is there. He played in big markets. I think clearly the thing that hurts him is he did move around. And a lot of that time was in Tampa Bay and in Atlanta before they were, but Atlanta was a marquee team in the 90s, and he was on a he was on the World Series team. So, yeah. But there is no doubt, I've said this before, and there is no doubt in my mind, you will never convince me otherwise, that if Fred McGriff did what he did and his primary career was in New York, LA, or Chicago, he's first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yep.
First ballot.
I mean,
and he went 10 years.
Short of 500 homers.
And he would have had that if not for the 94-95 strike. He would have almost certainly had over 500 homers if they hadn't missed those games.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he'll be a good one. And I think that the era committee, the good thing about Bonds and Clemens and these guys not getting in, and if that's the way it's done,
right.
I think it's good to leave it up to former players and see how they feel about it.
I do too, man. Hallelujah.
If there's 10 of them on that ballot that are like, shit, I took a couple things one time.
Right.
And, you know what I mean? I think it's a good thing to almost bypass this system and let guys that actually played and felt what it feels like, or felt what it feels to feel terrible and be getting old or have a bad year. And, the other thing I think Bonds and Clemens probably messed up is not admitting to it. I think
absolutely.
If you just say, like Pettit said, I did it, I'm sorry, I'm done. And everybody moved on from him. He's looked at as a great character now. Like
he's not in the Hall of Fame, but he's looked at differently as a person.
Yeah. And I think those guys, the best thing they could have done is said, here's when I started. I'm sorry. Like that's the hard part for you with Rodgers. You don't know when he started. You say went to Toronto and turned things around. If Bond said, you know what, I started in 99, I'm an asshole, I'm sorry. Everybody could look at his numbers, and I think a lot of guys would look at his numbers before 1999 and say, well, obviously he's a Hall of Famer.
And you look at those guys got up to like what, just shy of 70%.
You go sway a few.
There, and it went 10 years because they lopped off 5 years, because they probably would have got in if they kept going for another 5 years. It would have been real close. But if you look at where they are and how much they increased, well, if you throw in what you said, if they had come out and said, and all of a sudden people feel bad for them, you go, I feel bad. The guy's got, the guy was the first ballot Hall of Famer and he's done this. You would have got a lot more sympathy vote. You would have got, and they would both be in, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's those guys that are on the fence, or they don't have a hard and set policy about voting on steroid guys. A lot more of them would have voted for these guys if they would have just come out and said it.
Yeah.
They did it. Then they would have just looked at their greatness and said, all right, they screwed up, and they're stained by it. And they got, and they lost a lot of, commercial opportunities or whatever, maybe, post-career coaching or managing opportunities. Who knows? They lost money.
Bonds basically got blackballed for playing.
He did.
He still could have got it done. But yeah, I mean, for me, that's probably the big kicker is just not admitting to it and being honest about it. I think they could have swayed a lot of people just saying that, it's like, for me, when I was playing, I got offered, it wasn't steroids anymore when I was playing, because I came in right after the testing, and there were still guys that had ways to get around it, but I got offered HGH 3 to 5, 10 times throughout my career.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, it was tempting. I'm not going to act like I'm this, great guy. I thought about it because it was like, it's either go home.
Why wouldn't you?
It's tempting, but I looked at it and I was like, look, if I got on it now,
fits your career, man.
And anything. That's why I don't blame the guys that did it when it was get on roids or going home. But Roger and Barry weren't going home.
Barry was the best player in the game.
That was an ego move. But
ego, totally.
When I looked at it, it was like, I knew I wasn't going to do it. I just wasn't going to. But it crosses your mind when you give up a 5 spot and some dipshit that shouldn't be able to hit you just took you deep. Like, I'm better than this. But I knew if I got popped for it, 2010, 2011, 2012 wouldn't count because people are going to assume you're a cheater your whole career.
Yeah, you're stained forever.
And I went home. It was like, I'm not good enough anymore. I'm going home. And I think those guys, whether it was fame or stardom or the numbers or wanting to chase records and all that stuff, you sell your soul in a sense, and you kind of give up the Hall of Fame when you decide to inject a needle or rub that cream on. I mean, that's, like I said, I'm back and forth all the time on this, but that's how I look at it now. Is that's kind of a decision you made when you decide to get on the sauce. Is I want to be famous now. I want more money now. I want my numbers now. I don't want to go home. I want to keep putting all these butts in the seats and people talking about me, and their egos drove them to do it. Where if they were really, really worried about the Hall of Fame, they could have packed it in and been in the Hall of Fame. And who knows if they care anyway? Maybe they're glad they did it for an extra 5 years and got to have all that fun and make a bunch of more money.
Oh, they care. But, Bonds, man, again, I remember him with Pittsburgh like it's yesterday, how good he was when he was 60 pounds lighter and he was 30-30 guy, I always think about Bonds. I remember that when he hit the home run that broke Hank's record. Hank, couldn't be there or whatever. I mean, Hank wasn't in great health at that point, but plus you didn't know when it was going to happen. He's not going to be a traveling show where Hank goes around, at that age goes around the country, to like some younger guys can do when a guy's about to break the record. But Hank did this really gracious video that played on that huge board in San Francisco. And it was eerie almost. It was beautiful. It was like voice of God though, this Hank Aaron. It's like if Babe Ruth had done one when Hank Aaron broke his record,
Yeah.
He couldn't do that obviously, but but Hank on the video board. And I remember that. All I can ever think about was when you're Barry, and you probably met Hank a couple of times along the way when you're getting closer to his thing. And anybody that meets Hank knows. And also Barry from being his godfather, being Willie Mays, who was tight with Hank, and his dad, I'm sure, was friends with Hank, but Dusty was great friends with Hank. So Barry knows people that know, I'm sure, told him about Hank Aaron, that he's as salt of the earth, as good a guy, as great a guy as you'll ever meet. Civil rights guy, all this stuff. A great, great, great man. Everybody ever met him says one of the best guys I've ever met in my life. It's an honor to meet him. And then you see him doing that video presentation up there, and you just beat his record. What does that feel like in your soul to
I feel
know
like a fraud.
to know that you beat his record because you made yourself this 270-pound monster who's doing this at age 40, is hitting 70 home runs and slugging 800.
Yeah.
Come on, man. I mean, even his biggest supporters, and I understand the passion behind it, but you got to say that's got to feel bad when you're watching Hank Aaron up there, knowing this guy did this. He weighed 180 pounds. He did this while getting death threats every day, every day. For years, he was getting everywhere they went. I mean, it started his career. He couldn't even stay in the same hotels.
Yeah.
And you're beating his record. And it's I never can stop thinking about that. The guy's record, who he beat. This ain't right, man. But anyway.
Name of the podcast, right?
That's right, man. 755 is real, people. 8, whatever it was, is not. And we don't even know what it was. It just says it all. We have no idea how many home runs he hit.
Yeah.
I have no clue.
Yeah.
I have to think about it to even know what the single season record is. 61 was out there forever.
Yeah, 78 or something. I don't know. But that'd be the hardest part for me, is if I did do that. You're going around town and that's why I say it's ego driven, because if I was going around town and everybody's congratulating, people always want to talk to me about 2011. If I was on the sauce that year, And I couldn't even look you in the eye. I'd just be like, try to change the subject. But now when people bring it up, it's nice because I know I did it right. And I think that taking credit for all that and wanting the credit for the numbers they put up on the sauce and not wanting to lose their legacy as far as the way they want to be viewed is why they can't admit it. But I think it'd be a game changer if they just said, here's when I started, my bad.
Yeah, if the Oventbril would not have the same ring to it if one of those guys had been busted for steroids.
Find out all three of us were saucing that year. It's like, well, no wonder they put up those numbers and just move on. Nobody want to talk about it.
And you're 098. I wouldn't be asking you, how did you do that 098 ERA?
Honestly, I'd sit here and say, well, so and so handed me a vial and I felt good all year. I mean, it'd make a lot more sense, honestly.
It would. Well, I found HGH, man. It's wonderful.
Felt great. Woke up on that day game. Couldn't wait to pitch.
Hey, so yesterday in the Hall of Fame, though, real good news for Andrew. Speaking of Andrew, we're going to try to get him on a podcast here in a week or so. Hopefully. Andrew, if you're out there, man, we want you on here. Andrew has made some really good progress in the last 2 years, really encouraged that people, and I think that's analytics, or people are really looking at what his defense was worth now. And they're finally hearing all these Hall of Fame pitchers. It helps when you get 3 Hall of Fame pitchers in, and whenever they get an opportunity, and Chipper Jones too, whenever they get an opportunity, they say, hopefully Andrew Jones will join us here too, because he belongs here. That helps, and that's clearly helped. But also the analytics age, his value is starting to come out. He's gone up now to 41% of the votes in his 5th year. And if you look at the track record of guys who've moved from like the teens to 40% in a matter of 3 years, it's really good, that trajectory. He's got 5 more years now. If he had 15 years, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to make it. But I think there's a really good chance he's going to make it. Probably in another 3 years, maybe, and maybe sooner. If you look at Larry Walker, his was kind of an extreme uptick, but Larry Walker didn't even have 35% until his 8th year, and he got voted in on his 10th year. So I think Andrew's got a real good shot. I think Billy Wagner's got a good shot too, not as good, but he went from 46% to 51% this year. The problem is it's his 7th year, so he's only got 3 left. But Wags is another guy that I think people are understanding. There was so much reluctance to vote in closers for a long time, but now you've got a couple in there, and now they're comparing him to the guys that are in there.
Tell me a team that's won a World Series with a shitty bullpen.
Right.
I mean, you can't argue the importance of it, and I get that it's easier to it's maybe not easier if you ask me, because the 9th inning's tough, but starters are supposed to be a more important role in everything. But you impact games heavily, the way the opposing team's lineup looks at the game when they know it's a shorter game. We only got 7 to score when they got nasty setup man and closer. That's a major impact. But Billy Wagner's at 38, I think he was that last season, 2010. He could have kept going. He's the best lefty I've ever seen. And that's the thing with Andrew is when you talk to any former player, even Willie Mays said it, when you talk to any former player and you want to talk about center field, he set the standard. Like everybody was measured against him. And you talk to anybody that watched Andrew play and they say he was the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen. And he hit 400 something homers. It's not like he was a slap hitter.
434 homers. He led the league in homers and ribbies one year. The thing is, if Andrew had not started out, if he hit the Hall of Fame ballot now first year, totally different story. The fact that he started out, there was nothing. If you look at 5 years ago, people have come a long way in recognizing the analytics and hearing what other pitchers have said about him and all that. But if he'd started out now, I think he would start out with about 30, 40% maybe, and probably already be up to 80, if not in by now. Yeah. But after 5 years, Andrew, the thing that kept him out early on, people looked at batting average. Well, nobody looks at that anymore. And sure, he's going to have one of the lowest batting averages of anybody in the Hall of Fame if he gets in. But nobody cares about that much anymore compared to slugging, OPS, weighted runs created, all that, OPS plus. And in all those, he's much better. Batting average is one thing. Come on, you cannot when you look at some of the guys, because you look at some of the batting averages on players today.
Yeah.
there's going to have to be some players in the Hall of Fame with 260 batting averages before you know it, because they stress on base percentage now and slugging, not batting average. So you maybe say Andrew was ahead of his time, even though that's not why he was doing it. But, when you hit 434 home runs and you win 10 consecutive Gold Gloves
10 straight,
and Ozzie, and I keep going back to Ozzie Smith, you're looking at a premium defensive position. If you're the best at what you did defensively, you're the best player in the game.
Ever. Yeah.
Either the best ever or at least the best of your era.
Yeah.
And I think Andrew probably was the best ever. Willie Mays says he was. Yeah. But if he's not, he's certainly one of the best 2 or 3 ever. And I think he probably is the best ever because, how far defenses come, with positioning and all that. But and conditioning and speed and all that. But if you're the best at what you do, and you're the best defensive player ever at your position for a decade, you're in the Hall of Fame, man. Then you add 400. If he hit 200 home runs, I think he's a Hall of Famer.
Damn. Yeah.
If he hit 200 and he wins 10 straight Gold Gloves, I think he's a Hall of Famer. Look what Ozzie Smith did. He's 10 times the offensive player that Ozzie Smith was. Ozzie Smith didn't have any trouble getting in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
He made it in fast. So I just think 400 home runs and 10 Gold Gloves. It's a slam dunk to me.
And the goal too is you want to represent, like, you want these things to be remembered. So in 20 years, people are talking about the best defender and center fielder. You want, if you're the best people have ever seen at anything in baseball, for me, I think that should be remembered, and that should hold a lot of weight. Is that you were the best at first base, center field, whatever it is. Maybe not first base, but center field,
premium positions, up the middle,
defensive positions. Pudge was the best catcher, anybody best arm, all that stuff. When you're talking about center field, and you ask anybody that played in the 90s, who's the best center fielder you ever seen, nobody has to think about it. It's Andrew Jones, and there's no hesitation. And when players are talking about you like that, still 20 years later, players, guys that watched it and appreciated it. I mean, that guy's got to be remembered.
And the other thing that hurts him is the fact that he fell off so sharply at age 30. But people have to keep in mind that he debuted at 18. His first he was 19 and in the starting lineup. So what about if he debuted at 21, 22, like the average guy does? If he'd done that same decade that he had from age 23 to age 32, I don't think there'd be nearly as much criticism about it. People got to look at that, man. When he got debuts, it's totally different. And
he fell off because he was crashing into walls and being the best center fielder ever.
He was beat to hell. His shoulders from all those diving catches and crashing into walls.
Yep.
But, I look at it, Andrelton Simmons, we agree. He was the best defensive shortstop in the game for that period. He's still great, but he's had a lot of injuries. But it's like Andrew did. If you took Andrelton's 5-year period that he had there, 3-4 years where he was clearly the best shortstop in the game, and stretched it out for a decade. Yeah. Andrelton Simmons for a decade, and he, obviously his home runs and his home offense wouldn't be nearly what Andrew's was, the RBIs and all that. But if he'd done what he did for a decade without injuries, because Andrew was playing every day. That's the other thing. He was playing 158 to 162. This guy wasn't playing 135 like a lot of guys are today.
Right.
He and Chipper played every day in the primes of their careers.
Yeah, and but
Bobby played guys every day.
What's Chipper's career look like if Chipper was having to run around center field? He played premium third base too, but that's Chipper's body was beat up when he was getting toward the end, but he was playing a position that wasn't taxing his body the same way. And he'd be the first to tell you, look at what Andrew was doing, why he was so beat up is because he's running however many miles a night chasing balls down. Like that beats your body up. You can't knock a guy for that.
And he wasn't a skinny center fielder running out there. It looks like a sprinter. He's a big dude. And when he was younger, he wasn't big like he was later, but he was still a thick guy. I mean, he was never one of these rail thin guys that can run all day out there.
Right.
It's a big upper, but he was a strong guy. So that's a lot of weight to be running gap to gap, and he could fly, Yeah.
Well, just look at the value of defensive positioning, how that's changed the game. What are Andrew's numbers if he was positioned, perfectly?
Oh God. Oh my God. Because he did it on that first step he took a lot of times. He was taking literally for starting his first step before the ball left the bat.
Yeah.
Because he trusted his Hall of Fame pitchers so much, but the instincts too. I mean, he just knew it.
He's another guy, though. I think if he doesn't wind up getting in, I bet the Era Committee puts him in right away.
First, no doubt.
They'll appreciate it.
no doubt, because he'll probably have a pitcher or a manager on that committee,
hey.
arguing his case like La Russa did for Harold Baines.
Yeah.
Harold Baines.
Yep.
Harold Baines in the Hall of Fame, and Fred McGriff and Dale Murphy aren't. Come on, man. Again, he's another one. Andrew Jones, I say about like Fred McGriff. Can you just imagine if Andrew Jones had did what he did for the Yankees? Won 10 straight Gold Gloves playing center field for the Yankees?
No.
Is he first ballot? Yes. He's definitely in the Hall of Fame, and I think he's probably first
in
ballot.
That park, he's probably got 500.
Yeah.
I mean, he did it. Yeah. He hit 434 at Fulton County and Turner Field.
So many balls died in the gaps that he hit.
Right center, left center's deep there. You go to Yankee Stadium, he could slap balls out to right field.
Yeah. Anyway, Gary Sheffield, another ex-Brave, stayed at exactly 40.6%. That was pretty wild. His is 8th year. He's going to fall off the ballot. He's not going to make it. He's got 10 years. So it takes 75% to get in. Tim Hudson, he slipped to 3% his 2nd year, so he's off the ballot. Huddy, great pitcher, man. Not a Hall of Famer, but I think he'll get consideration by the committee too someday. I mean, he's a great pitcher. Great pitcher.
Well, that 300 win, nobody's getting in.
No, 200 will be the new 300, maybe, if there is a standard. Yeah, nobody's getting, 200, I think, is almost – in 5 years, 200 is going to be the 300, you know?
It will.
If it's not already. You look at guys who went 220 today, and that's a lot. That's a hell of a career.
Yeah.
And I mean, when guys are only pitching 160 innings, it's going to be totally different. The standards are going to be totally different down the line. I also think you're going to have some setup long relievers. Eventually, there's going to be one to make it in, like the guy in Milwaukee. There's going to be guys that make it in. Yeah,
Hader does this for 10 more years.
There's going to probably be a middle closer, a guy that maybe was a closer part-time and setup guy. Like we're just looking at things totally different now. So the role that's going to be different.
You kind of have to, but I think that's a good point. You know, that could really benefit Andrew.
So that ballot, the December, man, you talk about a glut. We had the glut on the regular ballot, all the steroid guys, which is also going to help Andrew next year, by the way. When you got the steroid guys are off now, when you take off Bonds, Clemens, Sosa, and also Schilling, jerk-off guy, you take them off the ballot, all of a sudden next year when guys are voting for up to 10 guys, I ain't going to be surprised if Andrew's thing shoots up 20% next year, man. Yeah. And Wags, too, is going to shoot up a lot. But Andrew's really going to shoot up next year because it's really clearing the ballot out a lot. The 4 guys go off after 10 years, they're gone.
Yeah.
But they move over now to the potential to be on the era committee ballot in December. That thing's a glut is full now. I'm on that committee that formulates the ballot. I don't vote on the era committee to make people clear that people that think I didn't vote for Bonds. Oh God, this asshole's not going to vote for Bonds now on the era committee. No, I'm not on the era committee, but I am on the historical overview committee that formulates the ballot that the era, where it's 11 of us that formulate the ballot. And I will just say here right now, I will be for Bonds and Clemens being on that ballot.
It's best case scenario.
Yeah, I think they should be on the ballot. Now you give it to those guys, whether it's this December. I don't know if they'll make it on this December because there might be some people on the historical committee that say, let's just give this thing time to breathe a little bit and go, because there's a lot of other guys that are worthy that might, because there's only 10 spots on it. So they might wait one cycle, but that thing meets twice every 5 years. So they're going to get their shot, whether it's now or another time in a couple of years. But I'll just say this publicly. I think they should be on it and then let that panel of 16 former players, former managers, you know, like you said, there's going to be some guys on there, maybe a manager or a GM or somebody that if they didn't play on greenies, then they know somebody that did, or they managed a team that had a bunch of players that did, or that managed a team that, you know, in the steroid era, even at the end of it. So there's going to be guys, it's a different voting body entirely. So you won't be able to blame the writers anymore after that one. You can blame us for not voting for 10 years if you want, but you know, and the other thing is there's 2/3 of the writers did vote for him. So I was in a minority that didn't. So don't blame the writers as a voting body for that, if you see that as a slight. But anyway, that committee, you look at the era committee, what they're going to have, the guys that can be on that ballot, because it can only be 10. And the other problem is you can only vote for 4 guys. It's not 10 guys. You can only vote for 4. They have to get 12 votes. So if you're one of those 16 people voting, it's harder to get 12 votes when you can vote for 4. You know what I mean?
Well, that could get hairy too, because a lot of players, even in the game now, look at steroids in different lights. Like
totally.
I've talked to guys that are like, they won't even associate with a steroid guy because they adamantly believe that you should never do that. It's cheating. You're out with them in any fun. I wouldn't eat dinner with you. But there's other guys that are like, I'm kind of in the boat of, I don't know what I would have done in the 90s if it was go home or get on the sauce. And my only point with those guys is they weren't going home.
The guys on that committee, if they know older Hall of Famers
that were on
those guys, most of them are hardliners and have said,
the old guys are.
A lot of them have threatened and said, I will not come here to the Cooperstown, because most of them go every year as long as they're healthy enough to do it. Some of them have said, I will not come here if Barry Bonds is elected to the Hall of Fame or Roger Clemens. They said that before. Joe Morgan came out and said, publicly, there's no place in the Hall of Fame for steroid guys. And Hank said, if they cheated, they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. So it's not a slam dunk by any means. So it depends on the committee. It depends on who you got arguing your case. Harold Baines had Tony La Russa arguing his case, and Reinsdorf were on that committee. Yeah. So Murph and McGriff especially need somebody, and McGriff could benefit from having a former Brave or 2 on there that played with him, arguing his case. I think Fred gets in, but it's a lot more political. It's kind of like the NFL Hall of Fame where you got guys stand up and argue your case and then they vote. So, it's going to be interesting, but that's why you get a Baines in there that just comes out of the blue and everybody's like, what? Did I miss something? They go back and look at Harold Baines' stats and go, no, I didn't miss anything. He wasn't, They look at his stats and wonder why the hell he made it. But if you just some of the names that are going to be that are up for consideration for the historical overview committee to consider for the era from the today's game era. You got a couple of managers that are probably slam dunks. Bochy, Piniella, those guys got to be on the ballot. Yep. Jim Leland, strong consideration. Jim Leland's on there for me, man. Great manager. And then you got, let's see, the players. When you look at the potential players, besides Fred McGriff, Bonds, Clemens, Sosa, Schilling, if they look at them, Lance Bergman, Carlos Delgado, Jim Edmonds, Kenny Lofton, Johan Santana, then some others, Albert Bell, Will Clark, Earl Hershiser, some other managers, Davey Johnson, Charlie Manuel. Then you got George Steinbrenner. So that is a lot of guys. Yeah. And you can only vote for 4. So I don't envy those guys on that committee, but
is there a time limit on that? Like how many years can you pass through that process?
There's not a time limit. So a lot of guys
keep bringing people up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So the thing those guys got going for them, though, is their votes aren't made public. So we don't know, who voted for Harold Baines or who did not vote for, Fred McGriff, or I think Fred missed it by a vote. Oh man. Anyway, Fred, I think he's got a great chance.
That'd be good.
It'd be a shame if he doesn't get it, but
should be one.
Hey, real quick, if we're following those that are following this, I don't know how many people are getting into the nuts and bolts of this negotiations, but they did meet the last 2 days, and this week they're finally meeting consecutive days, and they are meeting again today, I think. And but the Monday, Tuesday, the players met. I heard it was heated Monday, man. There was some yelling, which there should be at these things, to get something done. But this, you alluded to the big gap that there is between where the positions these guys are taking on the most topical or heated, subjects that the players really want changed, and that the owners are not giving as much as the players want. And then some things the owners want, the players are like, no way. So they got to come together, because there's still a big gap in the main areas, but there's already been some concessions made, which is that's promising. A big one was the bonus pool for pre-arbitration players, because those are the guys that get screwed now. The second-year guys that aren't in arbitration yet. Teams can give them minimum salary if they want to, and a lot of teams do give minimum or close to it, as you know. Players wanted a big pool of money for those guys to get bonuses from. That guys that have great years and are still in arbitration, they should get better paid, and they should. Yeah. players asked for proposed 105 million. MLB proposed 10 million. So it gives you some idea how much space there is to come together there.
Why we're still here after 45 days or whatever at lockout.
But the mere fact that both sides did agree that there should be something there tells you maybe there's hope. So maybe they can be closer to the middle.
Yeah.
But it just tells you they're at the stage of the haggling right now where both sides are like presenting way more or way less than what they know is going to take to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, that's how arbitration is too. When you first are talking to the team in December and that deadline's coming up, right up until the day before, the hour, the minute before the deadline where they have to agree to terms, they're still offering you $200,000-300,000 light. And they're comparing you to some reliever, you're better than, just to see if you'll take it. So it's like, if you think you're worth $1 million, they're like, no, what about 560?
Yeah.
5 minutes before the deadline. So, I mean, it's standard negotiation tactics going on, but it's almost worse that we keep getting updates.
Yeah. Then there was a minimum salary. Players obviously want that to increase. So that's not increased a whole lot. It hasn't
even increased with inflation.
No, not at all. MLB proposed paying 0 to 1 players minimum service time $600,000, 1 to 2 years $650,000, and 2 to 3 $700,000. They adjusted that to $615,000 on Tuesday, but again, you're talking about little small increments, and players obviously want a lot more than that. And so we'll see what we get. But the competitive balance threshold, that's another one where they're really still far apart. Owners want that to go up. Players want the threshold to go up. Owners don't want to raise it up at all. Players want it are very small. Players want it to go up a lot on how much teams can spend before they have to pay the competitive balance tax. So there's a lot. Those are the things, though, that people go, what's the biggest thing? Why can't they just get this settled? Those are the big things that they're looking at. And the bottom line is a lot of money for the owners. They don't want to give up hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the big market teams don't want to, or the small market teams don't want the big market teams to be able to spend $260 million before they even have a tax. Because for most of the teams, that just gives them more of an advantage, man. We can't have that, so.
Well, they also just, the less they can, that TV money, all those TV deals came in the game, changed everything. Because now you can run a team and just throw a horseshit team out there and make a great profit, and if you're just a business guy and you're not worried about the integrity of the game or the product you're putting out there, it's a no-brainer to just spend as little as you can and just take these checks from the big teams. And I think that's the big hang up for the players. And I've heard a lot of guys say it publicly is they want teams trying. They want teams trying to win. They don't want a team like the Pirates to be able to just spend $40 million or whatever they do and make a ton of profit off it.
Yeah. And revenue sharing, that's the other thing. The players want that reduced because they don't want that scenario that you just laid out. Owners love their revenue sharing, man. They rejected the union's push for $30 million cut in revenue sharing. They want that unchanged. The players initially had sought $100 million cut in revenue sharing, but they dropped that to 30 and the owners are still not giving. So let's see what another thing was. They asked for 50% tax on the overages. As Bob Nightingale wrote that their most recent offer on the matter would have been included a 50% tax on CBT overages, forfeiture of a third-round draft pick for surpassing that threshold.
The league wanted that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Players don't want anything like that, man.
No. It's that the thing is, though, is that, that's where the union messed up, is giving them a luxury tax in the first place and having any thought that it wouldn't be used as a salary cap. There was no chance that wasn't going to happen. And now they're trying to get that ground back, and you're never going to get it back. Now you got to bargain, of what percent it is, but teams are still going to use that threshold. As long as they can use that threshold to convince their fans they don't need to spend more money, they're golden.
And players who are people out there that are used to the NFL and the salary cap and how it's worked so well for the NFL. just forget it, because it ain't ever happening in baseball. They are the union, after taking the hits that they think they've took, the perceived hits, and what Eric just said about even agreeing to that. There's no way they're agreeing to a salary cap. So just forget it. Don't even bring it up. It ain't happening. The union pushed for the threshold to go from 210 million to 245 million next season. MLB countered with 214, so a $4 million increase. It's like, come on, man. And it maxed out at 220 million at the end of the 5-year term. That's like nothing.
I mean, and these are the offers I was talking about when the lockout first hit. Was like, they had their meeting, and you offer $100 and they're like, what about $1.50? Okay, I guess we're not getting anything done. But that's how this whole thing's played out. And I know it's ugly, and when you're on the outside of it, it can be frustrating as a fan. But both sides have to want to play ball.
Yeah, that's like you were talking about arbitration, and initially there's such a huge gulf between the sides, but then a lot of times when they actually swap figures, it's like a really small amount, and people are like, "Why didn't they just settle in the middle?" People don't understand, though.
Right?
They've already done negotiating, all right, and they weren't nearly that close. And both the team increases its offer, the player lowers his, because they know they got a better shot of winning. They're not going to win with what they were asking.
Yeah.
But the negotiation has already ended, and people don't realize before they agree to that, before they swap those figures.
If they don't know what those numbers are going to be. They're trying to submit a figure that the arbitrator could accept, so they might be $1 million apart, and they're like, shit, that guy's probably worth 1.6.
Right.
Let's go in at 1.45 and see if we can win and save 150. And the player's like, I'm not worth $2 million. I'm probably worth 1.7. Let's go in at 1.6. And then they submit 1.6 and 1.45. And you're like, they're bitching over 150 grand right here. I mean, that's how it works. And that's how this is playing out too.
And inevitably, though, every year when the salary figures are swapped and it's public, it comes out, you have people on social media are like, why didn't they just settle in the middle? It's like, that's not how it works. I mean, they would have if they'd known that both sides were willing.
Yeah.
If the owner, if the owner had knew that the player was willing to take that, they would have just given it to him rather than go to arbitration, because it costs both sides money to go to arbitration. They don't want to do that.
Yep. And that's just basic. That's just all negotiations in business. That's why I don't get too worked up about it.
Right. We talked about the Freddie situation. The only other one that I wanted to get to, I know we're dragging on here. Just a couple of other things on free agency. Jim Bowden went through and did the remaining free agents and ranked them top 70. But there's a couple other names that popped out on there. Obviously, I think Olsen's the best fit for the Braves if they don't bring Freddie back. But he's going to cost you prospects. Braves, we know how Alex hasn't given up one top prospect. He's going to probably have to give up a couple to get Olsen. Yeah. And the Braves, they're not prospect laden like they were. They have 3 in the top 100, where now Baseball America, where they've had 6, 7, and in the copy years. Well, a lot of those top guys are now on the team. Yeah. And when you're good, you don't get those draft picks. You don't have and they weren't in international free agency for a couple of years. So as a result, it's fine. We're seeing that now. They've 3 in the top 100, which isn't bad. There's 18 teams with 3 or fewer on there, but it's just not like they weren't like they were before, when they were consistently one of the top 5 guys on there, teams on there.
They got a World Series because they did it,
exactly. Right. So it's only the Dodgers are the only team that have been able to maintain being really good and this farm system. But and the Braves have got some others just outside the 100 that'll soon be in there. But they're not going to give up those top prospects. They're not going to give up. I could see him trading a Contreras. He's not. Hey, I got it. Cat's about to jump on top of my albums. I could see them trading, say, Contreras. He's no longer a prospect in the top 100, but they're not going to trade Shea Langoliers, who's their prospect catcher in the top 100. He's the number 2 prospect behind Harris. They are certainly not trading Harris. He's as untouchable, close to untouchable. I think Harris is probably since Acuna. I think he's that untouchable. Damn. Langoliers isn't far off, though. You're talking about a guy that's probably going to win multiple Gold Gloves, that will shut down a team's running game, and that last year hit for big power at the most least favorable ballpark in the minors in Double-A for offense in Mississippi.
Damn.
Shea Langoliers is the real deal, dude. Well, that's why a guy's not on top 40 or is not on the 40-man roster was kept throughout the whole postseason. He was supposed to go to Arizona Fall League, and instead they kept him with the team on the taxi squad through the entire World Series. If they needed him, if they had an injury, Shea Langoliers was going on the 40 and going on the roster. That's how good he is. And he hadn't played above AA. So
he's probably not getting traded.
He ain't getting traded, man. I could see them trading Drew Waters. I could see them trading Pache. I could see them trading Contreras. But I don't see them trading Harris, Langoliers. And I don't think they're going to trade Muller. I think we saw enough of Muller last year that he's pretty overpowering. I know he's still got some things to work on, but you love that guy, right? His makeup and everything.
I believe in him. Yeah.
6'7", throws 100 miles an hour lefty.
Yeah, he's learning still. You know, it's hard to trade him while you got to give him a chance to figure the league out.
Still young, man.
Yeah.
People can, he's still a couple of years younger than Freed was before Freed really blossomed, you know?
Yeah.
So, but just getting back to why they wouldn't, the Olsen trade, you know, it's not a slam dunk. I mean, if you're the Braves, you're going to have to part with some good prospects to get him. If they go the free agent route, there's a couple other guys on there. Now, they're not Olsen. They're certainly not Freddie, but they aren't, you know, Chris Bryant. If you get him, obviously, you're going to have to play him or Austin Riley. He's probably got a guy that's going to go to first base. I think Austin, they really probably don't want to do that because Austin really came into his own defensively last year.
I don't want to touch him.
I don't either, man. I don't want to touch him. I think that'd be a big mistake after the year he had. And I think the Braves probably view it that way too. Chris Bryant, he's a third baseman outfielder. If you sign him, he's probably not going to agree to play first base, but you'd have to have that agreement with him, obviously, before you did it. The one that I think is intriguing is Rizzo. Now, again, he ain't nearly what they are, but he's still a good hitter. He's still a great clubhouse guy. He's still capable of having a big year, and you probably can get him on one of those one-year deals that Alex loves.
Yeah.
For a guy that wants to reestablish his value, maybe, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing you're losing with Freddie. You know, I mean, I know his numbers are great, but he's the heart and soul of the team.
They're losing a ton with Freddie.
Yeah.
Just,
I mean,
we can't reiterate.
If he was an asshole, you couldn't afford to lose him, but he's the heart and soul of that team. You know, I mean, having your MVP for me, having that guy go out and play every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard the importance of guys like Ozzie and Dansby saying that they learned from Freddie, everything he is to the team. I mean, you're losing the heart and soul of your team after winning a World Series.
Yeah. I mean, you could trade for Matt Olson and hope and have a decent shot at him coming in and doing what Freddie does offensively, not skipping a beat there.
Yep.
Hell, he might have a better year than Freddie offensively, you know, looking at what he did last year and his age. But you are no doubt losing a huge piece of what was probably the best chemistry in baseball, best chemistry the Braves have had. And they've had good chemistry in recent years, but this was another level of chemistry.
Look what they overcame.
Nobody was more important.
Freddie wasn't a reason for that.
Nobody was more important to that than Freddie.
Yeah.
The guys you brought in were all terrific. Freddie establishes that whole thing, that vibe there, man. You take him out, that's a huge gulf there that somebody's got to step into that breach and fill that, you know, and that's tough because he's revered.
And when you've been somewhere for, you know, if you're Freddie and you go to a new team and start trying to change things and tell people, it's one thing when you have these numbers, but when he's been there for however many years, he's treated and respected in a certain way where if Freddie says it, that's just how we do things here. And he sets the tone for that whole team, that he just led a team to the World Series. You know, I mean, you can't afford to lose that more than you can't afford to lose his numbers. Maybe you can get numbers close to it, but anything can happen in a clubhouse, man. I know we talk about it all the time, but leadership is so huge. And this team overcame so much. They shouldn't, I mean, most people thought they had no shot winning the World Series, and they did it because of the team and the unit they were. And he's every bit of, I mean, he's the biggest part of that.
You've seen this. There's always a guy on a team, on a good team at least. There's always a veteran player that the manager leans on, that the manager pulls aside and says, gets a vibe at a clubhouse. There's a player that can walk into the manager's office anytime and tell him exactly what he did wrong. You can't do that, Skip. Freddie is that guy.
Yeah.
Freddie is that guy, you know, on this team. You know, Chipper, they had some guys back in the day. They had several guys that could do that. Freddie is that guy on this team that can go in and tell Snit, no, just so you know. So, and Snit, Snit says it all the time. I lean on this guy. This guy's, I talk to him all the time. I talk to him every day about the vibe and what's going on and everything. So
we had this meeting. I can't remember what year it was, maybe 11 or 12. We were playing a night game in Miami and we had some banquet the next day. And it was just something, you know, they wanted us there at like 10 a.m. We were going to get in at 3 a.m. And all the guys were fucking pissed. We're in this meeting. We're all talking about it, what we're going to do. And guys were talking about, we're not going, you know.
Right.
Chipper walks in, looks around the room and goes, we're going. And you got 24 other dudes in there heated. Chipper walked in and said, we're going. And we're like, whoop, that's that. And everybody just walked out. That was the end. Because that's how much everybody looked up to and respected Chipper and how much he set the tone. And that was the end of it. You know, I think there's so much value having a leader like that can just, you know, when there's any kind of, the team's divided over something and there's any drama in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Chipper could just walk in the room and say, this is the answer. And we'd be like, well, that's that. And nobody's mad. Nobody's pissed off about it. It's over. Chipper said, that's how we do it. And you respect him so much that, you know, he's making that right decision for the unit. And that's who Freddie's been for this team for 7 years now.
And you had Markakis with Freddie for several years there. Markakis was big time in that role too. But once Markakis leaves, it becomes even more important, Freddie's role in that, because there was nobody that stepped up and be Markakis.
Right.
You know, you had Tyler Flowers, who was a good leader before, you know, Tehran among the pitchers, Julio. But those guys were gone. And Freddie's role was never bigger than it was the last year. And add on top of that, add all the COVID protocols. And how important it was to have a veteran setting the tone and telling guys, so we got to do this, guy.
Yep.
Look at all the teams that lost games last year, that lost players for games. The Braves didn't do that. They were one of the few teams that didn't lose just a couple of incidents. You know, Soler during the LCS for most of it. But really, there was only like one or two other times during Newcomb during the year where you lost nobody for a long stretch at all. So that's, you know, probably going to have more COVID stuff this year in protocols. So it's important to have guys setting the tone and talking about all that stuff.
And nobody can have the thump of a dude that's been there and been doing it for 10 years.
Just the last thing, you were talking about this team and how they shouldn't have won it. It reminded me, I was talking to Marquise Grissom yesterday for a story I'm doing on Michael Harris. Marquise Grissom is like his mentor and his coach, and coaches him in summer ball and now again during conditioning in the off season. Marquise lives here in Atlanta. Marquise said, he was like you and Kelly were talking about how big it was when the Braves win for alumni, for them to win a World Series. Marquise said, and he played for a lot of teams in Montreal a long time. He said he was just thrilled when the Braves won. He said, yeah, he goes, we were supposed to win in 95. We didn't expect them to win this year. Maybe next year, talk about, 2022. So this could have been the year, and this could have been the year, and it was. But we were expected to win back in 95. But that's what makes this one so special, man. They won without one of the best players, and a couple of pitchers went down, and Freddie stepped up. Everybody stepped up, and it was unbelievable to watch. This Marquise Grissom talking about this. I asked him about Freddie, importance of bringing Freddie back. And, you know, some guys will be like, off the record, you know, he didn't say that. He said, come on, man. It's just crazy not to sign Freddie back. Would be insane not to sign him back, man. Freddie's got to be a Brave forever.
Yeah.
That was Grissom.
Yeah.
So that Scott played on championship teams, bounced around a little bit at the end. He knows the importance. So
I think he will be. I think it's just gotten a little hairy. But you never know, man. We'll find out soon.
Well, if we don't, I don't think it'll be I think it's not going to be Alex Anthopoulos' fault. He understands how important he is. If Alex if Alex knew that he would have the payroll to support Freddie's salary going forward, he would have done it already. So I just think Alex is cautious, knows the importance of depth and all that, and knows if they're not going to increase the payroll significantly, it's going to be hard to carry a $30 million salary. But
if you're in the GM position, the guy says you're going to get the last word. You know, if we're not going to sign somewhere else without offering you, then it's like, well, go ahead and go out there and drive the price up as much as you want. But we're not just going to offer 170 right now. If we're at 135, you come back with 160, we probably beat it. But that goes back to negotiations and all that too. It's a shame that it's gotten to this point and it's had to be this way. You know, that's the ugly business side of baseball that sucks.
And they got a lot of other big salaries coming up too. I know people look at the incredible team-friendly contracts they've got with Acuna and Ozzie. Nevertheless,
that's a reason to sign him alone.
Oh, exactly. Nevertheless, they got some other guys that if you want to keep them long-term, you're going to have to pay, and they're going to give some extensions to some guys soon. Guys like Austin Riley, guys like Max Fried needs it. Dansby Swanson. If it's not, is he your shortstop? If he's not, you're going to have to go get one on the market. So there's some guys that are going to make some money, and you're adding Ozuna's contract back to it too, unless you can find a way to offload that thing. So can't forget that. You're adding that contract back. You're paying your catchers handsomely, 2 catchers. You got, $20 million next year going to Big Charlie. Ian Anderson's going to need an extension before long. So there's some, you're going to need that money you're saving from Acuna and Ozzie if you're going to keep your payroll like under 200 million, which I'm assuming the Braves are going to do. They should be up there in that area right now, I think, but until they do it, no reason to believe it's going to happen. So anyway, a lot going on. Good to be back. Good to have stuff to talk about. I think we're going to have baseball. I don't know if we're going to start spring training on time, but Eric and I were talking about this before we went on the air. You guys don't get worried if they have to push back spring training a couple of weeks, because that's not going to mean
it's too long anyway.
Right. Pitchers can get going. They're the only ones that need that time to get there, to work up, the starters to work up to, 3, 4, 5 innings by the end of spring training, 6 innings. They can start now doing that wherever they are doing that. When spring training starts, they can be on that program. The hitters don't need. I've had hitters tell me, Gary Sheffield used to tell me, I need like 30, 40 at bats, man. That's it.
Yeah.
Most hitters, 60, 70 is more than enough at bats. Yeah. They don't need 80, 90, 100.
Yep.
They don't need 6 weeks.
Guys come into camp in shape now.
Ain't like it used to be.
It's not their first time running in the outfield when they go out there day 1 of spring training. They're training all off season.
I'm just a little worried, like what we were talking about, those the owners, how they can afford to lose 10 games in April, and it's not a big deal to them. That's the only thing that worries me. I just hope that they can look at beyond their own bottom line and look at the good of the game and realize you can't do that, man. People just and especially with the Braves, man, they don't want the World Series not to be able to raise that flag on opening day and give the rings and all that. You don't want you want that to happen as
don't
scheduled.
Want to give that ring to Freddie in a Dodgers uniform.
Ooh, like the Nationals had to do.
Yep.
Well, shit, the Nationals had to do it in front of nobody in the stands. Theirs was the ultimate bad year to win the championship. But you do not want to present Freddie his ring
in a different uni.
Ooh. Okay, that's it. We'll be back. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. I know we ran on really long today, but hey, it's first one in a while, so we won't skip this long before Sounds we have good. Another one. We'll do another one next week. We'll make that promise.
All right.
Everybody, 755 is still real, and it'll always be real. We're out. Thanks.